It is the most misunderstood role within the C-suite. The Chief Marketing Officer, a role that was once defined by glamorous brand campaigns and new product launches. Many, if not most, of the biggest businesses in the world today have been built on the back of marketing.
Uber is a great story of what I like to tell clients to do is lean into quality and don't chase the market to the upside. Let it come to you.
We have Airbnb up about 3.5% in after-hours trading. Revenue, pretty nice beat here, $1.53 billion.
In today's world, and especially as we look to the future, the role of the CMO is at a crossroads.
Every day, there's less and less oxygen in the room.
Right now, the CMO tenure is not a barn burner here. It's a tough position to keep.
Absolutely everything about the industry changed.
CMOs are really f***ed.
The role will look very different.
So to answer this question about what does the future of the CMO role look like, we reached out to some of the brightest and most progressive minds in the marketing industry. CMOs from challenger brands, but also incumbents that are all thinking about modern marketing from scratch for the way that the world actually is today. I'm Eric Fulwiler, former CMO and now CEO here at Rival. What does the future of the CMO role actually look like? In recent years, we've seen many high-profile CMOs leave their position and even leave the industry entirely. And we've also seen some businesses completely eliminate the role of the CMO.
What's really interesting when you start to dive into the data around what's happening to the CMO role is that you notice that 71% of Fortune 500s have CMOs. Now that's down from 74% in 2009. To add insult to injury, you'll also notice that the C-suite have quite a long tenure, but the CMO only holds their position for roughly around 40 months, which is the shortest out of all those C-suite positions.
So it can, in some ways, seem like a scary time to be a marketer or someone who is or aspiring to be a CMO. But actually, if you look underneath the surface and in the research that we've done, we found that there are really two big contributing factors to this reality. It is not about the role of the CMO not being needed. It's actually more about, one, how much it's changed over the last 10 years. It's probably safe to say that the last 10 years have been the biggest period of disruption for what it means to be and what is required to be a CMO since the inception of the position. And the other thing is that because of all that change, it's been a challenge for boards and organizations at large to really understand what they're looking for and what they should expect from a CMO.
Every single area of marketing is actually either obsolete or about to get obsolete, and we need to reinvent and reimagine marketing totally.
In the 1950s, marketing was in its golden age, and marketers were mainly focused on TV and print for industries like consumer goods and cars. By the 60s, creativity had taken center stage, with iconic campaigns such as Pepsi's Pepsi Generation. And in the 70s, data-driven strategies really began to shape how companies targeted customers. The 80s brought new media like cable and VCRs, pushing marketers to measure performance a lot more rigorously than they had previously. In the 90s, marketing expanded across sectors, and the CMO title became more commonly used. By the 2000s, the digital boom was here, and marketers had to redirect their attention to predominantly online engagement and social media. And by the 2010s, well, big data, AI has transformed that role once again, making personalization and customer experience the top priorities for most CMOs. As the role continues to expand and shift, there's growing confusion about what a CMO should actually be and what they should really be responsible for. It's no longer just about creativity. It's about technology, data, and customer insights. Now, marketing has always been tasked with the growth of a company, but what it actually takes to do that has completely changed. In a market of increased competition, complexity, and raised consumer expectations, it's a completely different ballgame compared to even just 10 years ago. The leaders who are doing it well are doing so by using a completely new marketing playbook. So what is this playbook?
What we've learned now over 3+ years and interviewing over 150 CMOs from both challengers and incumbents that are thinking and acting like challengers is a bit of a playbook of what modern next generation marketing needs to look like. So the foundation of this playbook, this framework for challenger brands, really sits on top of differentiation. Great challenger brands not only stand for something that is relevant to the needs of the audience and authentic to who they are, but it's also differentiated to what already exists within the category. Next is relevance. All brands always have grown through being seen as culturally relevant. However, the way that you are seen as culturally relevant is changing. We've seen some of the research that we put out about microcultures around this, but whatever the way in, the framework or the methodology, the way that these brands create relevance, they are doing it exceptionally well within the category. Next is talkability. And really, talkability comes down to putting content, stories, experiences, new connections out into the world that get people within the category talking so that the earned media of what a brand is doing allows it to show up and earn attention that is bigger than what it would get otherwise. Next is arbitrage. A lot of what we see with challenger brands is that they are able to show up and be bigger than they actually are. So their marketing presence, how the brand exists within the category, the mind share that it takes is much bigger than the substance behind it and the stage that the company is actually at. And a lot of that comes down to understanding the landscape of attention and finding those undervalued channels and pockets and ways to earn arbitrage within the media and the attention landscape. And last, but probably the most important because it really wraps around everything, is iteration. What we see with these challenger brands is that they are incredibly committed to and consistent with constantly testing, learning, and evolving everything that they do on the marketing front. So with the background and baseline of this playbook and all of the interviews and conversations that we've had to date, we set out to answer the question of what are the most important skills and capabilities that the future CMO needs to have and deploy within their organizations. And what we found is that those top 3 skills are being able to effectively and consistently communicate and speak the language of the board, own and deliver commercial results, not marketing results, commercial results. And lastly, to really understand, develop a skill set within, but more importantly, be able to leverage data and technology for your team and your organization at large.
One thing that came out as we started to do this research and interview different CMOs is that there's an overwhelming lack of CMOs at the board level. And in fact, Fortune magazine published a stat last year which showed that out of all the Fortune 1000 businesses, there's only 41 of them that have a CMO on their board. Now, this is obviously a problem, but one of the key things that we've realized is that for the future CMOs and the way the role is progressing, it's super, super important that CMOs are able to communicate their value, not only to the C-suite and the rest of their peers, but also at that board level so that they can have a continued impact and gain that influence.
So for this first principle of how and why it's so important to communicate effectively at the board level as CMO, we're bringing in a good friend and a marketer that I've respected for a long time, Megan Davis. Megan, over the course of her career at large incumbents like J&J and also challenger brands, has been incredibly effective at working with, communicating, and creating more impact in her role as CMO through this principle.
When you're a marketeer, especially at the CMO level, the more complicated things get, the more important it is that you can distill it to something that's relevant, memorable, and short. Simple.
We also spoke to Andrew Gary, the founder of the CMO Coach, who spent an illustrious career leading marketing at global brands from Huawei to Samsung and Qualcomm. This is his take on exactly why it's so important to be an effective communicator at the board level.
Whether it's explicit or implicit, the board sets the tone for the entire organization, especially for the C-suite and especially for your boss. So as a CMO, being able to influence and communicate with them is really critical. And it's critical not only because it sets the tone, but if you can really communicate well to the board, you can create confidence in the board. If the board has confidence in you, that gives you a lot more flexibility. It gives you a lot more freedom, and it gives you runway to try things out, runway to fail, runway to do things differently. And as a CMO, if you can get confidence, trust, and runway, you're in a really good shape. But more importantly, if you can do that and make your CEO look good at the same time, actually that's a really powerful thing for a CMO. And given CMOs should be the best communicators in the business, being able to do that at a board level is pretty critical.
So this ability to distill, simplify, and communicate clearly upward to the board level is incredibly important to being an effective CMO. But it's also about consistent touch points, building a relationship and building trust at the board level. So what are the practical tips for actually doing this on a daily basis? Let's hear from Dean Aragon, CEO and Vice Chairman of Shell Brands International.
There are 3 ways by which a marketing leader, a CMO, a marketing director can really be more effective in communicating to the business leaders. So the first one is, do you really understand how the business works? Who buys things? Why they buy it? How does loyalty get generated? Why do they return to you versus others? Why are you preferred? And if you can unpack that and understand the financial aspects as well, then there's greater confidence that you're not just in there for marketing fluff. On the second one, how do you avoid marketing jargon? Is it about selling to more people? Is it about expanding the addressable market? Is it about selling to the same number of people but at a higher price? And therefore you also grow the business? Or is it selling to new kinds of people? In other words, are you expanding into different segments? That way, you're able to really translate it to, again, how do you generate growth? How do you generate commercial success? And the third way is, how do you explain the role of marketing, the role of marketing activities, the role of marketing investments, help that process? For instance, are you using advertising so that you build awareness so that more people get to try your product because they're aware? Or are you using promotion so that they get to try your products and then sample it for the first time by lowering the hurdles to trial? Or are you trying to build loyalty, which I referred to earlier? I mean, the root word of customer is custom. Are you developing ways by which they develop the custom to return to you? Because if they're only tactical buyers, opportunistic buyers, then strictly speaking, you don't have a customer who has a custom of returning to you.
If you don't know what the brief is, you have failed. There's no amount of great marketing that's going to overcome that. And the brief includes, what are you trying to accomplish? How will you know you succeeded? And what are the relevant KPIs that you can go back to? You just hear, sometimes as you're chatting you'll be in a meeting and someone will say, oh, our YouTube campaign failed. And then you'll have a marketer say, what are you talking about? We got great click through. And they're like, yeah, but we got no sales. And it's well, we weren't going for sales. We were going for awareness. But you can't talk about that when it's done. You have to have that strategic clarity up front. And it's so important for the CMO to require that and to be able to articulate it clearly to the CEO and to the board, because these things fail all the time and you're not really sure if they failed or if you just actually didn't know what success looked like.
But ultimately, of course, it is not just about communicating internally. It is not just about the sizzle that you can deliver as CMO. It is about the stake of what you're actually doing for the business. The growth metrics, the commercial results, that is what matters at the end of the day. You can hide maybe a little bit of a blip under good communication, but at the end of the day, if you want to be an effective CMO in a successful business for the long term, you got to be able to own and deliver consistently the growth results for the business. And look, we all know as marketers, it's only getting harder to deliver these results, especially the last 10 years with the boom of VC funding, social media, especially in its early days when you knew you could put $1 in and get $3 out. That simple and repetitive ability to just focus on top line growth metrics that hid actually the effectiveness of true commercial growth and healthy growth underneath, that's no longer the landscape that we live in today. For this part of the conversation, we spoke to Gary Service. He heads up the marketing practice at one of the largest venture private equity funds out there that has backed some of the biggest and most successful tech and other businesses in the world, including Hootsuite, including Fanatics, and Checkout.com.
We're software investors. We're looking at software CMOs. And I say to CMOs after I interview them and I'm giving them their first onboarding call to their new role, I say, I'm not threatening you. I want to say that up front, not threatening you. But deliver on your demand gen goal or lose your job. You and I can agree on the beauty and majesty of marketing, how important brand is. I'm a huge proponent of brand. How important your tech stack is, how important it is that your website works correctly, how important it is that you have good data and reporting. These are important things. They're important. But in the end, deliver on your demand gen goal or lose your job.
Ultimately, they're responsible for the commercial results. They're responsible for sales. And I can't help but thinking to my time as a CMO, I actually took over the sales team about 6 months in, and my title ended up being Chief Commercial Officer, even though I was responsible for marketing, but also sales. And ultimately, the commercial results of the business. And I know, coming back to the title thing, that is something that we're seeing in a lot of businesses. The CMO title is either getting replaced or in some cases folded in with a chief growth officer, chief commercial officer. In some cases, I've even seen a chief product officer that has marketing rolling up to him or her.
I think you're going to see more functions that were traditionally in the selling realm moving toward marketing. And so today, we have the discussion about SDRs. Should they report to marketing? Should they report to sales? I don't think there's going to be that discussion going forward, because the way that CMOs are going to own everything leading up to that conversation, making sure that that conversation is personalized, making sure that that conversation is at a place with someone who actually wants to speak to you.
You can't be successful in a marketing campaign if revenue, short-term or long-term or both, is not driven. That's what we're all here to do as a cross-functional team, whether you're in supply chain or you're in marketing or you're the CFO. You're all there to create a product that creates value. Someone gets enough value out of the product, they're willing to pay what you're asking them to pay to have it. And if that doesn't happen, then something failed. And if you're the person who knows the consumer or customer best, then there's something that failed within that, flywheel. And that's okay. The failure is okay. But you can't have one saying, oh, it was a hugely successful campaign, and the other one saying, yeah, but nobody bought the product. Nobody purchased the service.
We've also seen this pressure that in the face of declining budgets, CMOs still have to deliver impactful growth. But how can you do this when you have a budget that is constantly decreasing? Let's hear from Lance Koenig, CSO and managing partner at Rival, on his take on having to do more with less and how you can continuously deliver growth as a CMO.
It's not about necessarily spending more. It's about really recognizing that you need to be far more purposeful in how you think about your consumer. One way to achieve greater effectiveness is on the backs of microcultures. We wrote a white paper about this, put it into the world last year, and it's a recognition that the world has shifted greatly, the marketing world. And it starts with this understanding that we have lived for centuries in a monoculture where a few people at the top of every vertical, music, food, fashion, etc., have been influencing, shaping, and telling us what we're going to wear, eat, what we're going to listen to. We live in a world that has been disrupted by social, where it is no longer top down. Rather, you have these communities of like-minded people who are influencing what we're going to wear, what we're going to eat, where we're going to tour, go on vacation, holiday, everything that you can possibly think of, to language. The way that we speak, the way that we use emojis is greatly influenced by the communities of people that we engage with. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about microcultures, Swifties, and the billions of dollars of influence that they had last year on the backs of the Eras Tour is an example of a microculture that has exerted a great amount of influence.
So if we take away all the buzzwords and we step out of the hype cycle for a minute, what do you actually need to know, and what do you actually need to do as a CMO to be effective in this world of data and technology? So to answer this question, we spoke to Professor Rajesh Bhargave, who teaches the Masters of Strategic Marketing course at Imperial College here in London.
CMOs, I think, are going to struggle to keep up with all that change. By the time they train their staff, there's something else coming up. So that's one of the huge challenges. The other part of it is to look at the data in its full context. So to understand when I'm looking at a piece of data, what am I also not looking at that moment? So understanding what other data I could collect and not being too persuaded by just one piece of data. You'll need marketing teams to be much more adaptable, and you'll need a team that has a diverse set of skills. But on top of that, specific skills, one absolutely is the marketing analytics aspect of it, that they have the facility with data to collect certain data and analyze it, and interpret that, and create a storyline around that. And then creativity, because these are not just data scientists, but they're marketers. So they should be bringing in novel ideas to the team. I think the focus should be on data interpretation. By this, I mean, when I look at some data, where is that data coming from? Understanding how data are generated. There's often big gaps there in the data where it's the source itself. And the other part of the interpretation is when you see a result, how to interpret that result. Sometimes we see a result, oh, that's statistically significant. Good, thumbs up. I got an A/B test and this result happened. But there's a lot more to that when it comes to understanding a statistic. So having that broader understanding of statistics is really key.
It's one thing to know that the world is changing, that you need to develop all these skills, understand all these different nuances about the way technology and data is changing. But how do you actually do that? As a busy CMO, you have too many things to worry about. So we spoke to Raja, the CMO of Mastercard, to understand exactly how he keeps on top of all of this learning.
So Raja, I'm a CMO. I understand and buy into the reality that I need to become, and my team needs to become, an expert in data, technology, AI. But I don't have time for that, My budgets are declining, my resources are being taken away. How do I actually go about learning these things? How can I upskill myself and my team?
The way I do it is I partner with my CIO in the company because they understand technology a lot more than what I will even begin understanding.
Okay, so the collaborative approach, actually leaning on other people internally and doing it together, not on your own.
The whole idea is collaboration, get their perspective, get their advice, get their points of view in. That's number one. So we have begun building tech stacks, adapting our tech stacks because we had tech stacks even before. But these are adapted now to make sure that the latest technologies like AI and Gen AI and the latest methods in quantitative analysis, all these are brought into the company's capabilities, into the technology stack. That's number one. Number two, people. We look at our entire population of people and see, do we have the right kind of talent who need to handle different aspects? So there are some areas that might have a gap. For example, do we have any AI specialists or people who understand AI very, very rock solid, Gen AI in particular? Do we have them in our talent pool or not? And so then we attract those kind of people. Third, everyone in the marketing organization needs to have a base level of understanding of all aspects of marketing, not just these technologies. So we have got an incredible learning and training agenda for our people. So for example, everyone needs to understand AI, at least to a basic level. Not everyone will have aptitude into technologies the way some people have. There are different levels, but everyone needs to be at a basic level. So what do? We have now a professor coming in and teaching us AI from 101, very basic. And then there are some people who will find out which cohort of people will have more aptitude, interest, and excitement around this. And those are the people who will start diving in deep into AI in a big way.
With all this learning to be done, it's so important that you aren't taken in by all the silver bullet thinking out there. Our perspective is that all of this data, technology, and especially artificial intelligence is going to be fundamentally and tremendously transformative to our industry. But really, we need to be thinking about the 10-year marathon, not the 1-year sprint right in front of us right now. So you need to be cautiously optimistic as you move into this world, and more importantly, know where the red flags are. And there's no one better to hear from on this than Jenna Cummings, our co-founder and chief media officer here at Rival, and Andrew Garahy, who both have super interesting takes on what CMOs need to be aware of when diving into this world of data, tech, and AI.
In the coming years, CMOs need to work with data and tech and AI skeptically. I think that the biggest risk that we face right now in the ecosystem is the sheer overblown claims and capabilities that are being made, not necessarily through any bad intent, although there absolutely are a ton of bad actors in this space that are really trying to have one over on people. A lot of people just don't understand what's truly possible with these technologies, and they're making such overblown claims, and that because there's so much hype right now, everyone is worried they're going to be left behind, and they're being pressured into making long-term decisions on the basis of bad information or faulty information as to what's truly possible with these technologies. I think we've probably all kind of heard that quote at this point in time of any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But the people that think that about AI and the current round of data and technology partners that we have available to us, they'll be taken in by cheap parlor tricks.
Don't get me wrong, AI is great at many things, right? It's great at making sense of data. It's great at personalization, targeting, CRO optimization, content production. Any of the functional tasks, it's great at. But as leaders in marketing, what I see is very few people are taking charge of it. They're becoming a victim of it. The CFO is driving it, or the CTO is driving it, or the founder is driving it, or the The CEO is driving it, not the marketing guys. And so what's happening a lot of the time is it's going to the obvious place, which is cost elimination, right? Cutting down production costs, cutting down headcount. That's a disaster for marketing. However, it should be treated like any other tool we've had in marketing throughout our history. We need a strategic approach to AI. And that approach needs to be in touch with our company's industry, our company's life stage, our company objectives, and a marketing problem, right? So if my marketing problem is a conversion problem, the CMO needs to take charge of that, and it needs to have a strategic approach to adoption, which the CMO needs to be in charge of. Now, if they do that, I think it'll be very different.
This might all seem like a lot, and it is, but actually, opportunity is always proportional to change. And there is so much change, there is so much disruption going on in the world of marketing and in and around the CMO role right now. For those that really embed these principles at the core of who they are as a marketer, as they work up the chain towards CMO, there is so much opportunity to accelerate your career and be a CMO that is more effective at the most senior levels of business within our industry.
I think the CMO in 10 years is going to absolutely be the owner of the market. No, there won't be a discussion of marketing versus market. Like, they own the market, the insights, the competitors, the ability to extract all of that. And they're going to have a role in the organization, which is going to be able to almost have to be real time in explaining how their markets are evolving.
So if you're a CMO who just comes in with a creative mindset, I think you have a solid foundation to continue in your role, but you can't stop there. You have to be learning as well, just as your junior marketers are learning these new tools. It's not enough to just push that on the juniors in your department. You need to try out these tools yourself. You need to be able to understand the data as well. Maybe not at the same level as one of your specialists, but at least have that experience in some of your projects that you've tried it out yourself. And that you can lead people who are doing that kind of work.
10 years before, you could afford to be just a marketing specialist and still be a successful CMO. Today, unless you are a true general manager or a business manager with a deep understanding of marketing, you are not going to be successful. You have to be a business leader first and foremost with a deep understanding of marketing as opposed to being a marketing specialist. That is the single biggest change that's going to happen.
Be endlessly curious, roll up your sleeves, don't take the sound bites, don't do AI because someone told you to do AI. Do AI because it's making something faster for you or making something better for you. I think that that's like the critical thing is hands-on, roll up your sleeves, but be able to articulate it in a way that resonates with your CEO and your board because it suits your consumer and it fits the brief that you had. And you do it as a partner with your cross-functional team. So everybody's in that same revenue top line game together. So just that. I don't think that's too much to ask of everyone, right?
So to bring it all together, to sum things up, hopefully you're on the same page that we are at this point, that the role of the CMO is not dying. It is simply evolving. And there are specific mindsets, specific principles and practices that you as a marketer or anyone who wants to be an effective CMO of the future needs to understand and really integrate into who they are and what they do. And to recap, those are: speak the language of the board, own and deliver commercial results, and turn data and technology into a competitive advantage. I'm Eric Fulwiler. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to discuss this topic or anything related to challenger brands, challenger CMOs, future of marketing, please reach out to us on our website. We're always up for a chat.